HOA. Karen demanded my cabin key. I told her over my deadbolt. I kept my mountain house keys to myself, and that alone made Karen lose her mind. Next thing I knew, she was calling the police and trying to force her way into my life. So I installed a face recognition lock, and that's when everything exploded. Stick with me. This one gets wild. And hey, if you love justice served cold, hit that subscribe button and stay for the next fight. I bought the cabin because it was the only place in Montana where the noise inside my head finally went quiet. A Cedar Ridge house, 30 years old, perched above a valley that hummed like a distant engine. After the divorce, after losing the rhythm of a life I thought was steady, I wanted a door that only I controlled. A door I could close without anyone reaching through it. So on my first morning there, coffee still burning my tongue, boxes half opened, tools scattered across the floor, I didn't expect to hear heels striking wood like a metronome of authority. By the time I turned, Bethany Crowell, the self-appointed queen of the Ridgeview HOA, was already inside my cabin. She didn't knock. She didn't announce herself. She didn't even glance at me. She walked straight to the mantel and ran her fingers across the ledge, inspecting a dust line like she was grading a failed inspection. "Mr. Carter," she said without looking up, "we need your house key." I blinked, trying to process the fact that I was apparently no longer inside my home. "A key? For what reason?" "For emergency access," she replied, as if it were universal law. "We maintain a central lockbox. All residents provide a physical key upon move-in. It's mandatory." She extended a red notice like she was issuing a citation on a windshield. I didn't take it. "Ma'am, I just moved in. I haven't even signed up for utilities yet." "That's why I'm here," she said, finally turning toward me. Her smile was thin enough to cut paper. "Compliance precedes comfort." The phrase hit me wrong. I set my coffee down, slowly. "I'm not handing over a key." Bethany tilted her head in a way that suggested disappointment and condescension lived together behind her eyes. "Mr. Carter, refusal triggers a non-compliance protocol. I'm giving you a chance to avoid unnecessary penalties." I stepped between her and the door. "I didn't invite you inside." She ignored that. She lifted her phone, thumb hovering. "Then I'll call the sheriff to document the refusal." "For not giving you a key to my own cabin?" I asked. "For obstructing community safety," she corrected, "and for an unauthorized interaction with an HOA officer." The heat that rose in my chest wasn't anger. It was the same pressure I felt during dam failure inspections, when one crack meant 10,000 tons of water searching for the weakest point. A quiet, focused irritation that made everything sharper. "Look," I said, "I'm not refusing safety protocols. I'm refusing your access. That's different." Bethany took a step closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in her contacts. "Your key, Mr. Carter. It's simple." "No." The air changed. Her pleasant facade snapped like a twig under a boot. "You'll regret that choice," she said, and her voice finally matched the steel behind her immaculate appearance. "The HOA will take appropriate action." She pivoted and strode toward the open door. Before she reached it, I called after her. "Why do you need the key so badly, Bethany?" She froze just for a breath. Then she walked out without answering. When the door shut, the cabin felt smaller. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was thick, like the air right before a breaker line collapses. My hand rested on the deadbolt, the one I'd installed myself the night before. I turned it, listening to the click echo through the empty space. A simple sound. A familiar one. But suddenly, it felt like I'd just fired the first shot in a war I didn't understand. I looked at the untouched red notice she'd left on my table. The text was bold, sharp, and legalistic enough to weaponize. Mandatory key submission. 24 hours. 24 hours for what? Why was she so obsessed with this key? Those questions didn't leave my head the rest of that morning. I was still staring at the red notice when the sound of tires grinding over gravel cut through the silence. I stepped onto the porch just as a sheriff's cruiser pulled up beside my truck. Sheriff Morales got out slowly, one hand on his belt, the other raised in a tired half-wave. He wasn't a man who rushed. He carried the same look I'd seen on engineers when the numbers didn't add up, concern buried under procedure. "Morning, Jake," he said. "We got a call." "Let me guess," I replied. "Bethany." He exhaled through his nose, confirming it. "She reported a resident refusing emergency access compliance and acting hostile toward HOA authority. Hostile. For standing in my own cabin and saying no. Sheriff, she walked into my house without permission." I figured there was more to the story. Morales opened his notebook but didn't write anything. "Look, I'm obligated to check. HOA disputes usually stay civil, but she phrased things strongly." Of course she had. Twist the narrative early, plant the idea that I was a problem before I even unpacked my toolbox. "Sheriff," I said, "this ridge? It's outside Ridgeview HOA's jurisdiction. The seller and title company were clear." Morales nodded. "That's why I'm here in person instead of sending a deputy. I've had dealings with Bethany before. She likes to stretch her borders." "Stretch," I repeated. "That one word doing a lot of work." He gave me the faintest grin. "Just confirming you didn't threaten her, raise a weapon, lose your temper, anything she can use." "No," I said. "I didn't even raise my voice." He clicked the notebook shut. "Then as far as I'm concerned, this call's resolved." But he didn't leave. His expression stayed too cautious for that. "What else?" I asked. Morales lowered his voice. "She's filing preliminary non-compliance penalties. Says if you don't give her a key by midnight, HOA is authorized to restrict utility privileges. Water lines specifically." My jaw tightened. "She can't do that." "She can threaten it," he corrected. "And if she gets the board to back her, she'll force a hearing. If you don't respond inside their portal, she'll escalate." Portal. The digital chokehold HOAs loved. Fines, notices, warnings, all automated, all weaponized. I crossed my arms. "Sheriff, how does she get away with this?" Morales looked toward the valley. "Most folks here don't fight back. They just pay or move. She's been running things a long time." "So she thinks she can make me fold." "She thinks she can make anyone fold," he said. "But if your deed excludes you from HOA boundaries, she's bluffing. Hard. Bluffs only work if the other side doesn't know the rules." "Jake," he added, "watch yourself. Bullies get unpredictable when they feel power slipping." He drove off, leaving the dust hanging in the air like a warning. By afternoon, my phone pinged with the first fine, then another, and another. Non-compliance. Emergency access fee issued. $250 daily penalty beginning at midnight. 500. Then a second notification. Potential utility review. Water safety access required. There it was. Her leverage. I logged into the HOA portal out of curiosity. My address was listed under Ridgeview Perimeter Zone. Not within HOA boundaries, but flagged as subject to emergency considerations. A loophole she'd invented for me. Scrolling deeper, I found more. A banner across the top read, "Final reminder. Key submission, 24 hours." I clicked into the bylaw she quoted. Section 4.2, Emergency Access Provision. It required a key for all residences within Ridgeview jurisdiction or properties under Community Impact Review. Under. A single word that let her claim territory that wasn't hers. But something bothered me more. The date of the bylaw revision 3 months ago. meaning she'd added this language before I ever purchased the cabin. I leaned back in my chair. Was this just control, or was something else in play? Another notification hit my inbox. HOA action logged. Water safety review initiated. A threat disguised as procedure. At 5 p.m. I heard something else. The slow, scraping grind of a vehicle pulling up the ridge again. Not the sheriff. Not a neighbor. A white SUV. Her. Bethany got out, heels clicking like the morning, but her smile was gone. "Mr. Carter," she said, "you've ignored the compliance notices. I read them. Entirely different thing." "You have until midnight," she said, "but I wanted to make something clear in person." I waited. The HOA has the authority to enforce emergency safety measures. If you refuse access, you put residents at risk. Lives at risk. She leaned closer. "And we won't tolerate negligence." "Negligence," I repeated. "For refusing to hand over a key?" "For refusing to participate in a safety protocol," she corrected. Safety. She kept repeating it like a script. "What's really going on here, Bethany?" Her expression didn't flicker, but her posture changed, a tightening in her shoulders. "I don't know what you're implying," she said too quickly. "But you need to comply. Tonight." "No." Her nostrils flared. "Then you will face consequences." "Is that a threat?" "It's a guarantee." She turned, walked back to her SUV, and slammed the door hard enough to shake the glass. As she drove off, I spotted something on the back window. A sticker. Ridgeview Security Contractor. Access Team. Security. Access. Inspection. Too many words pointing in the same direction. I walked back inside, looked at the red notice again, and felt the first real wave of suspicion settle into my gut. She wasn't after a key. She was after the access the key represented to my land, my cabin, my privacy. She needed something inside here, or needed to prove something wasn't. Midnight was still hours away, but one thing was certain. Whatever game she was playing, I wasn't folding. Not tonight. Not ever. And if she wanted to involve the police again, I'd be ready. Because if her first bluff had broken this easily, how desperate was she to force the next one? I wasn't going to wait to find out. By sunrise the next morning, I had my workbench set up on the porch. Cables, screws, a reinforced steel mounting plate, and a compact biometric scanner lay across the surface like pieces of a puzzle only I knew how to solve. The system was one I'd designed years ago for remote dam stations, reliable, tamper-resistant, and useless to anyone without the right face. If Bethany wanted to weaponize bylaws, I'd counter with something she couldn't bend. By mid-morning, the old deadbolt was off, and the new brushed steel plate was welded into place. The scanner hummed with a soft blue pulse as it came online. No keyhole, no latch, no physical bypass. A fortress disguised as a door. At exactly 10:12 a.m., her white SUV pulled into my drive again. Right on schedule. The passenger door opened, and a man stepped out carrying a well-worn locksmith kit. He walked with the confidence of someone who'd cracked 1,000 locks. Bethany followed him with the confidence of someone who thought she'd already won. She pointed up the steps without greeting me. "That's the door. Remove the obstruction." "Obstruction?" I echoed. "You mean the lock?" "It's not compliant," she snapped. "And you have refused to provide a key, so we are exercising community emergency protocols." The locksmith walked up to the door, reached for a keyhole that didn't exist, and stopped dead. His hand hovered over the seamless metal plate, confusion tightening his brow. He brushed his fingers across the surface, searching for a seam, a cylinder, anything. "What am I looking at?" he muttered. "A lock," Bethany barked. "Open it." The man shook his head. "There's no mechanical entry point, No cylinder, no latch. This is a digital security panel. Override it, she ordered. He stepped back. Ma'am, I don't carry the equipment for whatever this is. This looks like federal infrastructure grade. I'm not touching it. It's a door to a cabin? She insisted. He cannot install whatever he wants. I stepped forward. Actually, I can. My deed makes no mention of HOA oversight. And since you've been very clear about how unsafe I am, I took precautions. Bethany spun on me with a fury that snapped the tight edges of her composure. This is unacceptable. Emergency responders need physical access. That's not what the bylaw says, I replied calmly. It says the HOA must have access. This system provides that. She crossed her arms. Where is the key, Jake? You're looking at it. I leaned in and let the scanner glow reflect off her sunglasses. Emergency access will be granted, I continued. You'll just need to register your face. The locksmith choked on a laugh he tried and failed to hide. Bethany went pale, then red, then something in between. You expect me to submit my biometric data to you? You expect me to hand you a piece of metal that grants unrestricted access to my home. We stared at each other across the porch. Her heels dug into the boards like she could splinter the wood through indignation alone. This violates multiple provisions, she hissed. Show me where, I said. I've read 4.2. It requires access, not a key. You're obstructing safety protocols. I'm reinforcing them, I countered. Do not twist the rules. I'm following them exactly. The locksmith backed down the steps. Ma'am, unless you've got a court order, I'm not drilling into that. You'd be liable for damages. Count me out. He climbed into his van and shut the door, leaving Bethany alone on the porch with nothing but her rage to keep her warm. She jabbed a finger toward the scanner. This isn't over. It never is, I said, when someone's bluff gets called. She stormed off, heels stabbing the ground with each step, and her SUV tore down the driveway, kicking dust into the air like a retreating dust storm. But it wasn't victory I felt. It was the shift, subtle, but unmistakable of someone who'd just realized force wouldn't work and was now preparing something more methodical. The lock was installed. My door was secure. But if there was one thing my engineering career taught me, it's that you never stop at the first failure point. You push pressure against the next weakest spot. Bethany had just learned she couldn't enter by force. That meant her next attempt wouldn't be physical. It would be procedural, legal, quiet, and infinitely more dangerous. I went back into the cabin, checked the scanner calibration, and powered up a small server to record every attempted access. If she wanted to escalate, I was ready. But as I finished securing the frame, my phone buzzed with a notification. HOA alert. Non-compliant barrier installed. Fines updated. Then another. Potential emergency review. Water safety. Then another. Board session requested. Foreclosure discussion. Foreclosure. For a lock. The blue light on the scanner pulsed steadily like a heartbeat, but for the first time something colder moved through me. The lock had worked. The bluff had broken. But Bethany wasn't trying to get into my cabin anymore. She was trying to take it away entirely. The foreclosure notices, the fines, the sudden safety reviews, none of it was about rules. It was leverage, pressure designed to force me into surrender before I understood what she was actually protecting. And I needed to know what that was. I spent the next 3 hours combing through the HOA portal, cross-referencing bylaws, property maps, and the financial summaries they posted to comply with state transparency laws. Most HOAs assumed residents never read these documents. Most residents didn't. I did. Line by line, the budget told a story that contradicted everything Bethany had said. Under security and perimeter maintenance, I found it. V-Lot, security contract. Parcel 14A, the vendor. Hail Terrain and Survey Solutions. The payments, recurring, monthly, and suspiciously consistent. Parcel 14. A was my cabin. Except my cabin wasn't vacant. It hadn't been for months. Why was the HOA still billing the community for vacant lot security? And why was that money going to Bethany's cousin, Marcus Hale? I clicked deeper. The invoices were signed by Marcus himself. That was the first crack. The next crack came from the county records, which confirmed that the original owner of my cabin had passed away unexpectedly 2 years prior. The property sat empty until the estate sale. Empty. Vacant. Meaning Bethany and Marcus had enjoyed nearly 2 years of a lucrative contract for a parcel nobody lived on, and now their cash stream had vanished the moment I moved in. I leaned back and exhaled slowly. If I were running a quiet, profitable scheme built on a property nobody questioned, the last thing I'd want is a landowner who read fine print and installed locks I couldn't bypass. This wasn't control. It was panic. To confirm the suspicion tightening in my ribs, I needed proof, something undeniable. So I accessed the archived inspection logs. Most were routine. Fire alarms, drainage checks, external structure notes. But the logs for Parcel 14A were different. Every entry had 2 signatures, B. Crowell and M. Hale. Every inspection was marked as incomplete due to unverified access, and every incomplete inspection triggered an automatic renewal of the vacant lot security contract. So this was the scam. Keep the lot classified as restricted access. Fail the inspection on purpose. Get the contract renewed indefinitely. But the system's flaw, the one they never expected, was me. I clicked the most recent inspection entry. A ghost of a smile tugged at my lip. The timestamp was dated after I'd already bought the cabin, meaning Bethany had filed a vacant lot inspection renewal while I was holding the deed. I printed the financial logs, the inspection files, the contract approvals, and the timestamp history. The server spat out page after page black ink evidence against a woman who believed no one would ever check her work. When I was done, the table was littered with documents that painted a picture of organized fraud. Not sloppy, not small, intentional. A knock came at my door. Not a pounding, not an intrusion, just a hesitant knock, almost nervous. I glanced at the monitor connected to the security camera. It was Tom Bennett, a neighbor from 3 lots down, retired lineman, gentleman, lived with his wife and 2 dogs, the kind of guy who apologized for interrupting before you even opened the door. I stepped onto the porch. "Jake," he said quietly, "word's gotten around that you pushed back." I raised an eyebrow. "That fast?" The Tom nodded. "Bethany called an emergency board meeting last night. Said you're a danger to community order. You might want to know the board isn't fully with her. Folks are getting tired of her stretching rules." Stretching. Same word Sheriff Morales used. Tom lowered his voice even more. "She's been pulling stunts like this for years, but no one ever looks at the accounts. No one checks the logs. We're just residents. You're the first one she can't bully." I motioned to the stack of printed papers on the table. "She's been paying her cousin for fake security inspections on my parcel. For years." Tom's eyes widened. "You sure?" "I've got signatures, timestamps, contract renewals, and the kicker, she renewed the contract after I moved in." He let out a low whistle. "That's felony territory, Jake." "I know." I handed him a copy of one document, an invoice showing Marcus billing the HOA for a vacant lot inspection dated 3 weeks after I bought the property. Tom swallowed hard. "If she finds out you know this, she won't just fine you. She'll come after everything. That woman does not lose." "That's why I'm documenting," I said. He nodded. "Good. Just be careful. When people like her feel cornered, they do stupid things." He left with the paper in hand, walking briskly down the steps like he didn't want anyone seeing him there. I watched him go, then turned back to the pile of evidence. This wasn't about a lock. This wasn't about a key. This was about a fraud network that only survived as long as my property stayed vacant, which meant I wasn't the problem. My existence was. That afternoon, I called Sarah Whitfield, a land rights attorney who'd helped me verify boundaries before closing. She picked up on the second ring. "Jake? Everything settled with the HOA?" "Not even close, Mount," I said. "I need your help, and I need confidentiality." Her tone shifted instantly. "Tell me what's going on." I explained the lock situation, the fines, the emergency water threats, then the financial logs and inspection fraud. When I finished, she let out a slow breath. "Jake, this is intentional, coordinated, and illegal." "Which part?" I asked. "All of it," she said. "Fake inspections, shell company payments, emergency clauses used as leverage. It's systematic abuse of authority. They're using HOA bylaws to hide a financial pipeline." "So what's my move?" "You build a wall of evidence. You document everything, and you don't confront her yet. Cornered people escalate." I glanced at the blue pulse of the scanner. "She already has." "Then you need to stay ahead," she said. "Send me the files. I'll start cross-referencing county audits." I uploaded everything, every log, every invoice, every renewal. Sarah studied them quietly. After a long pause, she said, "Jake, they're terrified of you." "Of me? Why?" "You can read what no one else reads. That makes you the most dangerous man on that ridge." I ended the call and looked out over the valley. The sun was low, carving long shadows across the trees. Behind me, the cabin felt less like a sanctuary and more like a bunker. I had the evidence, I had the motive, and now I understood exactly why Bethany needed access so badly. If I kept her out, her entire empire could collapse, which meant she wouldn't stop. Not until she tried everything she had left. I didn't have to wait long. By the next morning, my inbox was drowning, dozens of automated fines, sudden safety violations, threats of foreclosure hearings, and a portal lockout claiming my resident credentials were under review. A digital noose tightening around my name. Bethany had escalated from pressure to punishment. Every action she took had one purpose: make the situation unbearable before I realized how strong my legal footing actually was. But she underestimated one thing: engineers live in the details. And when the ground trembles, we don't panic. We look for the fracture line. It was around 9 when the first neighbor approached. A woman in her 60s, gray hair pulled into a clip, clutching a gardening apron like a shield. "Jake?" she asked, voice low. "Can we talk?" I stepped onto the porch. "Of course." She kept glancing down the ridge as if expecting someone to appear. "I'm Evelyn. Lot 11. I heard about the meeting last night." "Bethany's meeting," I said. She nodded. "Most people didn't want to attend, but she pressured the board, said there were emergent behavior concerns with a new resident." I almost laughed. "Emergent behavior?" Evelyn swallowed hard. "They're saying you're refusing all safety protocols, ignoring board directives, and that your cabin is structurally unsafe because you disabled standard emergency access. She wants the board to vote on an emergency foreclosure trigger." There it was, the nuclear option. "For a lock?" I asked. "For independence," Evelyn corrected softly. "Bethany hates when people don't fall in line." She hesitated, then pulled something from her apron pocket, a folded sheet. "She left these on the board table," Evelyn whispered. "I thought you should see them." I unfolded the paper. A printed violation log. Except the dates were wrong. The entries were falsified. Most described interactions that never happened. Resident obstructed officer access. Resident tampered with water meter. Resident verbally threatened board representative. Fabricated. All of it. I met Evelyn's eyes. "Why show me this?" Because I've lived under her thumb long enough, she said. And you're the first person she couldn't intimidate on sight. If anyone can expose her, it's you. I thanked her, scanned the document into my evidence folder, and watched her hurry back down the hill, looking over her shoulder the entire way. The mountain wasn't just watching now, it was whispering. Around noon, another car arrived. A black vehicle with tinted windows stopped halfway up the drive. The engine stayed running. No one got out. I walked several feet closer, enough to see a silhouette in the driver's seat. They didn't move, didn't wave, just sat there, watching. 10 minutes passed before the vehicle backed down the ridge and disappeared. I recorded the plate number. When I called Sheriff Morales, he sighed heavily. "Jake, you're on their radar. Someone filed 3 welfare checks already this morning. Claims you're unstable, potentially dangerous." "Unstable?" I repeated. "I'm sitting here doing paperwork." He grunted. "I know, but they're trying to build a pattern. If they get enough complaints, they can request a forced entry wellness inspection." There it was again, access. Always access. "Sheriff," I said, "do you know anything about a black sedan watching the cabin?" "Probably one of Bethany's contractors. She's used security vendors before to justify invasive checks." He paused. "Keep recording everything, and don't answer the door unless you want to." I hung up, feeling the walls shift around me. Not closing in, exactly, but tightening. A pressure chamber waiting for something to give. By late afternoon, 5 new finds appeared in the portal. Exterior hazard, unapproved modifications, lock, failure to appear at emergency notice hearing, potential waterline irregularity detected, mandatory compliance review scheduled, foreclosure discussion docketed for preliminary vote. She was escalating faster now. The evidence I'd discovered had shaken her more than I realized. My phone buzzed, Sarah Whitfield calling. "Jake," she said before I could speak. "I analyzed the documents. This is bigger than simple fraud. They're laundering contract funds through Marcus's shell company. You're a threat because your presence ends their renewal cycle. So she's trying to drown me in violations before I can expose her," I said. "Exactly. She wants to trigger an emergency foreclosure, seize your property through procedural abuse, and bury the fraud under litigation." I walked to the window and looked out at the tree line still, quiet, but wrong in its silence. "What do we do?" I asked. "You document every action she takes, every threat, every misuse of bylaw language." Sarah's voice sharpened. "And you force transparency. HOAs crumble the moment sunlight hits their paperwork." I grabbed my camera, scanned each notification, and sent her the newest violations. "Jake," she added, "I'll be honest, Bethany won't back off. She's afraid you'll uncover something that implicates her personally." "I already did." "You don't have the full picture yet." I frowned. "And you think she knows that?" "She doesn't think," Sarah said. "She knows. Bullies don't panic unless the truth is close." I hung up and spent the next hour cataloging every notice, every falsified entry, every attempt at procedural intimidation. Each piece added weight to the coming confrontation. Around dusk, the second neighbor came. Tom, again, but this time he wasn't carrying paperwork. He looked shaken. "Jake, something's happening," he said. "Bethany's been driving around talking to everyone. I heard her say you're blocking emergency infrastructure. She's prepping the board for something big tonight." "How big?" I asked. "She wants a unanimous vote for an emergency abatement order. That means officially, they could send a contractor to forcibly enter your cabin to verify structural integrity." I stared at him. "Abatement is for pests or hazards, not homeowners." "She doesn't care," Tom whispered. "If she convinces the board your security system is a community hazard, she'll send someone up here with tools. And the sheriff? She'll call it an urgent risk. He won't get here in time unless someone tips him off." The stakes sharpened like glass. If she succeeded in passing that order, My cabin wouldn't just be vulnerable, it would be open to sanctioned destruction under the guise of safety. I breathed once, steady and controlled. "Thank you, Tom," I said. "I know the risk you're taking by telling me." He nodded. "We're not all afraid of her. Not anymore." As he left, I turned to the biometric lock glowing faintly on the door. Tonight wasn't the attack. It was the preparation. Bethany was winding up for a hit she believed I couldn't stop. But she had no idea how much evidence I'd already stacked against her. And she definitely didn't know that every step she took only tightened her own noose. The mountain watched as the last light faded. It felt like the calm before a dam gives way. Not silence pressure. And I knew what came next. Bethany wasn't done escalating. She was just getting started. The next 48 hours felt like living in a pressure chamber. Nothing explosive yet, just sustained, deliberate force pushing in from every side. The kind of pressure that didn't want to break you suddenly. It wanted to wear you down. I woke before sunrise to the sound of something heavy rolling onto gravel. I checked the camera feed and saw it. A black pickup pulled halfway up my drive, engine idling, headlights pointed at the cabin like a threat without a voice behind it. No one got out. The truck didn't move for nearly 20 minutes. Then it backed down the ridge and disappeared through the trees. A surveillance pass. A warning. A test. I logged the plate number and uploaded the footage to my evidence folder. If Bethany was setting the stage for a forced entry abatement, this was her opening act. Around mid-morning, Sheriff Morales showed up again. No lights, no sirens, just the same steady footsteps climbing my porch. "Jake," he said, rubbing his eyes. "We need to talk. Let me guess, another welfare check?" "3, actually," he said. "Filed anonymously, all within an hour." I shook my head slowly. "She's trying to build a pattern." "She's trying to build a case," he corrected. "If she gets enough of these on file, she can argue you're unstable, non-responsive, and a potential danger. That gives her the pretext for what she's calling emergency verification." "Which is just a legal term for breaking into my home," I said. "Pretty much," he admitted. "Listen, I can't block welfare checks, but I can mark the reports with context. And I'm telling you now, something's brewing with the HOA. A couple board members called me last night. They sounded scared." "Scared of what?" "Of Bethany," he said plainly. "And of whatever she's planning next." He rested a hand on the railing, weighing something in his mind. "Jake, I've watched rural HOAs go sideways before. It starts with small violations, then fines, then property rights get interpreted. Now she's escalating to stability concerns. Next step is abatement, and with someone like her, that could mean anything." I nodded once, steady. "I'm ready." "You better be," he said, stepping back. "Because she's not looking for compliance anymore. She's looking for justification." He got in his cruiser and rolled down the ridge, leaving me with a cabin that felt quieter and heavier at the same time. By afternoon, the HOA portal locked me out entirely. Account suspended. Compliance review pending. I tried to reset my password. Nothing. Tried the support number. Straight to voicemail. Then I received a fresh slate of emails. Notice of structural hazard. Potential roof failure. Mandatory inspection refused. Documented board. Considering emergency intervention. I walked outside, looked up at my perfectly stable roof, then back at the screen. They were fabricating hazards now, and if they fabricated them, they could claim the right to inspect them. A forced entry under a different name. The mountain wind kicked dust across the porch, and for a moment I felt something I hadn't felt since my engineering days, analyzing a dam under stress. The exact second where you realize the numbers don't fit, and failure is coming faster than anyone expects. I went back inside and called Sarah. She picked up immediately. "Jake, I've been reviewing more records. It's worse than we thought." Define worse. The inspection logs, she said. Every time your parcel was marked as inaccessible, it triggered a security renewal payout. But here's the kicker, there's no record of those inspections ever being attempted. No contractor invoices, no labor hours, nothing. So the inspections never happened, I said. They were invented, she confirmed. Bethany forged review signatures. Marcus billed for work nobody performed. And now that you're living on the property, you've exposed the whole thing simply by existing. Which is why she wants me gone, I said. Not wants, Sarah replied. Needs. You are the single point of failure in her financial system. I let that settle for a moment. What do we do? She inhaled sharply. We prepare for the next escalation, because I promise you, Jake, it'll be soon. I ended the call and sat at my desk, scanning every document again. Each page sharpened the picture, a network of fraud woven through false inspections, falsified votes, and emergency authority she stretched like a rubber band. And I was the snag the thread caught on. Near dusk, I heard gravel crunch again, but this time it wasn't slow or cautious. It was intentional. A black truck, the same one from earlier, except now it stopped farther up the ridge near the tree line, engine off. The silhouette inside didn't move. Then another car pulled in behind it, a sedan followed by a third vehicle, a contractor van with no company name. They didn't approach the cabin. They watched. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Then they left, one by one, fading back into the fog rolling low across the ground. Surveillance again, but coordinated, routine, like a team rehearsing before a job. This time, I didn't just log it. I forwarded everything, photos, timestamps, descriptions to Sarah and Sheriff Morales. Then I took a walk around the cabin perimeter, checking windows, testing the biometric lock, verifying the server's recording loops. Everything was tight. Everything was sealed. I stood on the porch, listening to the quiet. The kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful, it was anticipatory, calculating. The ridge wasn't asleep, it was holding its breath. Somewhere between the trees, Bethany was tightening the rope, aligning the board, preparing a vote she thought would break me. She was wrong. Because anger wasn't driving me anymore. Strategy was, and whatever she unleashed next would bring her closer to the one thing she feared most: exposure. But that next move, her biggest escalation yet, wouldn't come through emails or fines. It would come through engines, real ones, and tools designed to tear through steel. The first engine hit my gravel drive at exactly 9:03 p.m. A deep industrial rumble, not a truck, not a pickup, something heavier. I checked the camera feed, and my stomach tightened. A generator on wheels, a contractor's cutting rig, 2 board members in reflective vests who had no business being out here at night. And in front of them all, stepping out of her white SUV like she owned the mountain, was Bethany Crowell. She pointed at my cabin before her boots even touched the ground. Start the abatement. The contractor climbed out of his van, holding a metal case shaped for one thing, a high-frequency cutter designed to melt through reinforced frames. I hit the record button on my console. Every camera on the ridge went live. I opened the intercom. This is private property. You have no warrant. Bethany stepped into the light. Her hair was perfect. Her expression ice. I don't need a warrant, Mr. Carter. The board voted on an emergency entry authorization. Your door is a safety hazard. We are resolving it. You forged the hazard report, I said. She smiled. Prove it. The contractor approached my door, eyeing the biometric plate. Ma'am, this isn't standard residential hardware. This looks... It is non-compliant, she snapped. Cut it. He hesitated. Without a sheriff present, I could lose my license. You'll lose your contract if you don't, she shot back. The man swallowed hard, then pulled the cutter from the case. A heavy, ugly tool that made my reinforced lock look suddenly vulnerable. The generator roared to life, shaking the ground. My cabin, my last piece of peace, was about to be breached by people who didn't even pretend to care about the law. I stepped back from the door, positioned my phone toward the hinges, and let the recording capture every second. The cutter touched the edge of the metal plate, and sparks erupted across the porch in a violent spray. The sound was a scream of angry steel being forced to obey. The cabin vibrated like the frame itself was resisting them. Bethany stood back with her arms folded, smug, certain she'd won. Marcus Hale, her cousin, and the architect of their fake inspections stood beside her, watching the metal glow orange under the heat. "Won't be long," Marcus muttered. "Then we get inside." Inside. Exactly where they needed to go to plant whatever evidence they hoped to justify the foreclosure. Another shower of sparks hit the boards, burning tiny black scars. I spoke calmly through the intercom. "This is an unlawful entry." Bethany didn't even look at the door. "It's an emergency abatement. And this time, Jake, you won't interfere." She truly believed she was unstoppable. And maybe tonight she was, if no one saw what she was doing. But someone was seeing. Dozens of neighbors' phones had chimed earlier when I'd quietly sent out the footage of their trucks approaching. For the first time in years, Bethany's late-night bored actions weren't happening in the dark. She just didn't know it yet. The cutter heated the steel to a throbbing orange. A hinge began to bend. One more minute and the door would give. I braced myself, not for violence, not for confrontation, but for the moment the truth would collide with her confidence. A loud crack split the night, then another sound, the strobing thunder of multiple engines racing up the ridge. Bright white floodlights burst through the trees like a wave rolling over the mountain. Voices shouted, doors slammed, radios crackled. Bethany froze, mid-command. The first cruiser skidded to a stop behind her SUV. Then another, then a third. Sheriff Morales stepped out, jaw clenched, badge catching the generator glow. "Everybody drop your tools!" His voice traveled across the porch like a verdict. The contractor lifted his hands immediately. "Sheriff, I was told..." "That this was an abatement?" Morales growled. "On private land? At 9 p.m.? With a cutting torch?" "Step away from the door." Bethany pivoted toward him, her composure fracturing. "Sheriff, the board authorized..." "The board doesn't outrank the law," he snapped. Marcus took a step back into the shadows, but several neighbors, yes, neighbors had followed the sheriff's convoy and now flanked the driveway with phones pointed at him. Morales turned to me. "Jake, are you okay?" "Still behind my door," I said through the mic. "Still recording." The sheriff nodded once. "Good." Then he faced Bethany. "This is attempted forced entry, and from where I'm standing, it looks coordinated." "Sheriff, please," one of the board members stammered. We didn't know the full situation." Bethany said. "Save it for your statement," Morales cut in. Bethany tried to recover. "This man has refused every safety inspection." "Because they were falsified," another neighbor shouted. "We've seen the footage. He offered access. You refused it." For a moment, just a breath, the mountain fell into perfect, damning silence. Then Morales reached for his radio. "Dispatch, confirm, does this residence fall under HOA jurisdiction?" Static. A pause. Then a reply. "Negative. Property is outside HOA boundaries. Documents on file." Something broke in Bethany's expression. Not shock, not fear, recognition. Because she had known. She tried anyway. Morales stepped forward. "Ma'am, turn around. You're being detained." "For what?" she snapped. "For attempted unlawful entry," he said, "and whatever else the investigation uncovers." The contractor sagged with relief. Marcus froze. Board members stepped away from her like she was radioactive. The cutter's orange glow faded to black as the generator shut down. My cabin was safe. For now. But this wasn't over. Not even close. Bethany was cornered. And cornered people didn't surrender, they escalated. The real battle wouldn't be fought on my porch. It would be fought in court. And after tonight, she'd be bringing everything she had left. By morning, the ridge looked different, not because anything had changed physically, but because the night before had rearranged the entire balance of power. Neighbors who once pretended not to see Bethany's intimidation tactics now watched me with cautious solidarity. Sheriff Morales had made it clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was misconduct. Still, Bethany wasn't the kind of person who folded when caught. She was the kind who doubled down. At 8:17 a.m., my phone buzzed with a new notice. Emergency board filing. Hazard. Abatement justification submitted to county court. I read it twice. She was already trying to reframe last night's break-in as a lawful action. I forwarded the notice to Sarah, who didn't need more than 30 seconds to call me. Her voice was clipped, controlled, a tone she reserved for when things were serious. "Jake, they filed a petition," she said. "They're claiming last night was an unfinished abatement and that the sheriff interfered with a mandated safety procedure. She's trying to flip the narrative." "She's trying to erase it," Sarah corrected. "The contractor statements, the recordings, the fact you offered safe access, they're hoping the court seals it all under procedural immunity." My jaw tightened. Can they do that? Usually, no. But a determined HOA with internal allies can make enough noise to stall a case. We need to counter this immediately. And Jake, there's something else. I sat up straighter. What? One of the board members contacted me privately this morning. He's willing to cooperate. This was the shift I'd been waiting for. By noon, a small group of neighbors gathered near the bottom of my drive. They waved me down as I stepped outside. Among them stood Tom Reynolds, a man who'd lived here 30 years and never once raised his voice louder than a gentle greeting. "Jake," he said, removing his cap, "we saw everything last night. Folks are tired of Bethany acting like she owns the valley." Another neighbor spoke up. "She fined us for leaving a tractor in our own field last fall. Said it was visual blight. And she threatened to pull our water meters," a woman added. Tom nodded. "We've been scared to challenge her. But what she tried with your door, that wasn't HOA business. That was something darker." I scanned their faces, tired, angry, relieved to finally say it out loud. "You all willing to testify?" I asked. Tom didn't hesitate. "We're done being quiet." Their statements alone wouldn't win the case, but they added weight community pressure Bethany couldn't silence. At 3:42 p.m., the courthouse emailed a summons for an emergency hearing the next morning. Not next week, not after deliberation, tomorrow. Meaning Bethany had sprinted to the courthouse the moment the sun came up. She wanted to regain control before the sheriff's report hit the system. I printed out every piece of evidence I had, access logs, video files, timestamps, screenshots of fabricated hazards and escalating fines. Then I backed them up twice, once to a local drive and once to a cloud server Sarah controlled. Because if Bethany had taught me anything, it was that you never show up to a legal fight with only one copy of the truth. Just after sunset, I was on my porch tightening the last bolt on the damaged railing when headlights appeared again, far gentler this time. It was Sheriff Morales. He climbed out slowly, walked to the steps, and exhaled hard. "You're going to court tomorrow, and I'll be there." "You planning to testify?" I asked. "Already filed my statement," he said. "But you need to know something before you step inside that courtroom." He handed me a document, a sworn affidavit from the contractor. I read the first lines. I was instructed by HOA President Bethany Crowell to cut the lock regardless of safety concerns or property rights. I was not shown any legal authorization for forced entry. Morales continued. He came into the station this afternoon. Said he couldn't sleep last night after realizing how close he came to breaking the law because she bullied him into it. This was big, bigger than anything we'd had before. As the sheriff walked back toward his cruiser, he turned once more. "Jake, listen carefully. She's scared. People like Bethany don't panic because they lose power. They panic because someone finally sees how they used it." I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of fear. Because this was the first time I could see the path forward clearly, an arc that led straight to accountability. The hearing would be the turning point. And Bethany knew it too. Because at 11:53 p.m., just before I shut down my server, a new email came in. Legal notice. HOA seeks court order for forced entry due to digital obstruction. They were changing strategies again. First it was safety hazards, then unstable homeowner claims. Now digital obstruction, a fabricated term meant to demonize the very lock that protected my home. They weren't just trying to justify what they'd done. They were trying to justify what they planned to do next. I read the notice twice and then forwarded it to Sarah. Her response came instantly. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we end this." The morning of the hearing, I stepped outside before dawn. The mountain ridge was quiet, not calm, not peaceful, quiet the way a courtroom is quiet before a verdict is spoken. The biometric lock's metal plate was still charred from the cutter. I rested my hand on it. Bethany had tried to break into my home. She'd tried to silence evidence. She'd tried to twist the law into a weapon she alone controlled. But in that attempt, she revealed everything she'd been hiding. Tomorrow would be her reckoning, and the court would finally see the truth she'd spent years burying. The county courthouse wasn't grand or intimidating. It was a square brick building that smelled faintly of old paper and dust. But stepping inside that morning felt like crossing into enemy territory. Not because of the court itself, because of who waited on the other side of the aisle. Bethany sat at the plaintiff's table in a navy suit that looked borrowed from a catalog. Beside her was Marcus, jaw clenched, trying to look like a concerned citizen instead of the man whose fraudulent security contracts were about to unravel. Their attorney, a polished litigator named Julian Thorne, leaned back in his chair with the relaxed confidence of someone convinced the outcome was already written. He didn't know what we knew. Sarah placed her briefcase beside me and whispered, "Remember calm, direct answers. We have the evidence. They have the performance." Judge Harris entered and the hearing began. Thorne stood immediately, voice smooth as he launched into an argument as rehearsed as theater. "Your Honor, the HOA was attempting a lawful emergency abatement. Mr. Carter installed an experimental digital barrier that prevented physical access required under Bylaw 4.2. His refusal posed a direct risk to community safety. The board acted responsibly." He gestured toward me like I was the malfunctioning appliance in question. I stayed silent. Thorne continued. "Furthermore, we moved to suppress any video Mr. Carter presents. He recorded HOA officials without consent, violating privacy expectations." Sarah leaned close. "He's choking on his own argument. They were on your property." Judge Harris nodded once. "Motion to suppress is denied." A small fissure cracked in Thorne's composure. Bethany shifted in her seat, not yet crumbling, but beginning to sweat. "Proceed," the judge said. Thorne straightened. "Your Honor, we simply request authorization for a forced entry to ensure compliance with community bylaws. Nothing more." Sarah stood slowly, the way a surgeon might prepare to make the decisive incision. "Your Honor," she said, "what the HOA calls an abatement was, in fact, an illegal forced entry coordinated through falsified reports, fabricated hazards, and a pattern of fraudulent billing practices." She clicked the remote. The first video clip appeared on the courtroom monitor. Bethany on my porch, ordering the contractor to cut the lock. Sparks exploding. The cutter glowing orange. The board members standing by like enforcers. Thorne objected. Out of context. Overruled, Judge Harris said, eyes narrowing. Clip after clip played, each one building a wall around their lies. Then Sarah opened a folder and placed a set of printed ledger sheets on the judge's bench. These are the HOA's own financial logs, Your Honor. Logs showing yearly payments marked as vacant lot security for a property that was never vacant. She flipped a page. Paid to Langston Ridge Services, a shell company registered to Marcus Hale. Marcus paled. Sarah continued, voice steady, controlled. The HOA presented my client's address as an unoccupied structure to justify non-existent inspections and funnel money into private accounts. When Mr. Carter moved in, he unknowingly shut off their revenue stream. Judge Harris frowned. Is there corroboration of this? Yes, Your Honor. She held up a sworn statement, the contractor's affidavit from the night of the break-in. In this testimony, the contractor confirms that Ms. Crowell ordered him to cut the lock without any legal authorization and under false claims of emergency. Bethany stood abruptly. Those signatures are misinterpreted. Our actions were necessary. Sit down, Ms. Crowell, the judge said sharply. You will have your turn. She sat, but her face was cracking, anger mixing with panic, a cocktail of someone watching their empire collapse. Sarah pressed forward. Additionally, Your Honor, we move to present evidence that the so-called board vote authorizing this abatement did not meet the required quorum under the HOA bylaws. Meeting logs show that the email notices were sent after the vote occurred. Thorne scrambled. Your Honor, the timestamps are documented, Sarah said. We also have statements from 2 board members who confirm they were pressured into silence. Tom Reynolds and another neighbor, Martha Diaz, stood from the gallery, an unexpected, powerful visual. Judge Harris leaned back, folding his hands. Ms. Whitfield, are you alleging systemic misconduct within the HOA? I'm alleging criminal misconduct, Sarah replied, including fraud, falsified records, and attempted unlawful entry with intent to seize property. A silence hung heavy in the room. Bethany finally spoke, voice trembling with fury. This entire mountain community relies on my leadership. Without enforcement, it would fall apart. Judge Harris raised one eyebrow. Ms. Crowell, this court is evaluating facts, not delusions of grandeur. Laughter rippled faintly through the gallery before dying under his gavel. He turned to me. Mr. Carter, do you have anything to add? I stood. Only this, Your Honor. I offered them access directly. They refused because it would create a record they couldn't manipulate. Everything they did was to avoid being seen. Judge Harris nodded once, thoughtful. Then he took off his glasses. This court will not authorize forced entry. In fact, it appears Mr. Carter may be the only party here acting within the law. He glanced at Bethany, at Marcus, at the ledgers, at the videos. I am ordering a full forensic audit of Pine Ridge HOA, he said. Effective immediately. All financial accounts frozen pending investigation. Bethany gasped. Marcus swore under his breath. Thorne collapsed into his chair. And finally, the judge continued, this court is considering criminal referrals for attempted unlawful entry and fraud. You will be notified as the audit progresses. The gavel struck. Bethany's empire shattered in one clean sound. Sarah exhaled slowly beside me, her relief quiet but unmistakable. We did it, she whispered. I corrected her gently. We started it. Because this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of accountability, the kind Bethany had escaped for years, but not anymore. The aftermath moved faster than anyone expected. News traveled across Pine Ridge like a cracked dam, releasing years of pressure. By the time Sarah and I stepped out of the courthouse, a small crowd had already gathered near the steps. Neighbors, former board members, even people from the adjoining valley. Some nodded at me. Some clapped Sarah on the shoulder. Some simply looked stunned. as though they were seeing the first sunrise after a long winter. But none of them looked at Bethany. She emerged flanked by Marcus and Thorne, though even Thorne kept a careful inch of distance between them now. Her face was tight, jaw trembling with a fury she no longer had the leverage to unleash. When she saw me, she paused as if trying to summon the version of herself that once controlled this ridge. But that version was gone, and she knew it. 2 days later, the sheriff's office published the findings of the preliminary audit. The numbers were devastating. Nearly $150,000 siphoned into shell companies, faked emergency inspections, fabricated maintenance requirements, false fines issued to residents who never challenged them. And the vacant lot security line, the one tied to my cabin, was the smoking gun. Sheriff Morales drove up to my place personally. He held the official envelope in his hand. "It's done. The county prosecutor has filed charges against both of them." "Both?" I asked. "Bethany and Marcus," he confirmed. "Racketeering, fraud, attempted unlawful entry, misuse of HOA funds. The list's long enough to need its own binder." He wasn't exaggerating. The state investigator had asked for an itemized breakdown, and the breakdown alone filled 20 pages. Morales lowered his voice. "Jake, I want to be clear. You didn't just win for yourself. You freed an entire community from someone who abused every ounce of authority she could get her hands on." I nodded. "Then let's hope the community stays free." A rare smile crept onto his face. "With her gone, it will." He tipped his hat and left me standing at the top of my steps, envelope in hand, wind at my back. For the first time since I'd moved into this cabin, the ridge felt like mine. Not borrowed, not contested. Mine. The judge dissolved the HOA entirely within a week. No appeal, no restructuring, no more Pine Ridge Board. In its place, the county appointed a temporary trust to oversee essential services until residents could elect a new committee one, with limited powers and mandatory oversight. But the part that hit hardest wasn't the legal language. It was watching the old HOA sign being removed at the mouth of the ridge. A handful of neighbors invited me to swing the first hammer. I declined, not because I didn't want it gone, but because I'd already had my closure. Instead, I watched from the porch, arms crossed, as the gilded sign that symbolized years of intimidation came down with a final dull crack. Afterward, Tom Reynolds walked up to my steps. "You should have hit it once, Jake." "Nah," I said. "I hit them where it counted." He grinned, nodded, and joined the others hauling the broken pieces to a truck. The sound of laughter relieved floated across the mountain. It struck me how long it had been since anyone up here laughed without glancing over their shoulder. Bethany had run this community like a kingdom. Tonight, the kingdom didn't remember her. That evening, I replaced the melted biometric lock. Not with another advanced system, not with reinforced steel or dam-grade hardware. I didn't need those anymore. I installed a simple, solid deadbolt. Clean, heavy, honest, something symbolic. The final screw tightened with a satisfying click. Then I shut the door, turned the bolt, and listened to the mechanism slide into place. A sound that felt like reclaiming something I'd lost long before moving to Montana control over my own life. I stepped onto the porch. The air smelled of cedar and faint wood smoke drifting from someone's cabin down the ridge. The valley lights shimmered in clusters across the hills. Everything was quiet. Not tense, not expectant, just quiet. I didn't realize how much I'd missed that kind of quiet. Sarah called, checking in. "You holding up all right, Jake?" she asked. "Better than all right," I replied. "How long until sentencing?" "A few months," she said. "But the prosecutor is confident. And with the audit, they won't talk their way out." I thanked her again, though it didn't feel like enough. Lawyers fought in court, but Sarah had fought alongside me from the moment I reached out. Without her, the truth would have stayed buried under Bethany's paperwork. Take some time to breathe, she said warmly. You won? I hung up and leaned against the porch railing. Won. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like equilibrium, like something shattered had finally settled into place. Like the ridge had exhaled. As the sun dipped behind the pines, staining the sky in burnt amber, I walked to the edge of my property. A small stake still stood near the boundary one Bethany had hammered in my first week here, marking HOA compliance zone like a warning. I pulled it out of the dirt with one hand. The plastic snapped easily. I tossed it into the fire pit and lit a match. The blaze flickered, then rose, consuming the last relic of her reach. My land, my rules, and finally, my peace. When the fire died down, I went back inside, shut the door, and turned the deadbolt again. A final quiet click, a sound that belonged only to me. Because this cabin wasn't just where I lived. It was where I'd taken my life back. If you've ever had to stand your ground the way I did, drop a yes in the comments so I know I'm not the only one out here fighting for what's right. And if stories about justice, dignity, and defending your land hit home for you, go on and subscribe. I've got more truth and grit coming your way.